All right, folks, we're going to get going today. So today's Saturday session is going to take us through the Coleraine University Controversy. So this is one of our documents-based questions for both this year and next year's Leaving Cert. So we're going to cover all the content that's needed to answer this question, and we'll look at it in the context of a past paper and go through kind of, I suppose, tactics or strategies to answer that question, and we'll provide, hopefully if we get enough time, to go through a sample answer as well. So before we get going, I'd just like to highlight the Saturday session calendar for October. Sorry, my apologies. So you can see there's a Saturday session every Saturday in October. It takes place at the same time every Saturday, 11 to 12, for both junior cycle and Leaving Cert subjects. So there's something for everyone there, and I just encourage you to check in with that and keep an eye on the schedule, because there'll be more coming up over November also. I'd also just like to highlight the ExamRevision website. So not only just for Leaving Cert history, but for a lot of Leaving Cert and junior cycle subjects, we see, I suppose, the whole course covered with video breakdowns, past paper, links to past papers, H1 notes, PowerPoints, and self-correcting quizzes. So you can see here we're looking at the USA and the wider world topic from Leaving Cert history. You can go in, you can see a video breakdown of every different topic from the course. Within that, you have self-correcting quizzes to test yourself after engaging with the content. And you can also see there's different types of notes, PowerPoints and Word document notes there, where you can see there's icons and stuff just to help break that down as well. So if you're interested in, I suppose, logging on to ExamRevision, because you're attending today's Saturday session, you can use the code Coleraine to get 20% off standard and premium plans. So you can see that that's valid until 12 o'clock tomorrow night. So our roadmap for today, what we're going to be looking to cover is essentially, first we're going to cover the content for the Coleraine University Controversy. Sorry, apologies, I'm just going to turn my pen on here because it's not actually working. Sorry, I can't get that working. We'll just keep going anyway. So we're going to break this down into 4 different topics. So we're going to cover the content that we need to answer the question. We're going to go over the guidelines for answering the DBQ, or the documents-based question. That's what I'll refer to it as we move forward from here. So there's 4 different types of questions. We'll break down what those questions look like and how our answers should look for those questions. We'll look to how to plan for a contextualisation question, or as I'll refer to my students as the mini essay. It's a smaller type of essay that we'll answer within the document-based question. And then finally, we'll put everything in context, and we'll look to give a sample answer on the Coleraine University Controversy. So we can break the content of this topic into a couple of different sections. We're going to cover a bit of background info, the expansion of university education in Britain, and then how that kind of shaped the expansion of university education in Northern Ireland. We'll look at the history of Magee College in Derry, and how I suppose the word controversy is going to come up a lot here when we're looking to cover this topic, and how the history of Magee College in Derry caused a bit of controversy around this issue. We'll look at the formation of the Lockwood Committee, what they were looking for, and once again, the controversy that was, I suppose, arisen around this Lockwood Committee. We'll look at the final decision, and then we'll look at the significance of the controversy, I suppose, in the wider context of Northern Irish history. So what was Northern Ireland like under Basil Brooke? So Basil Brooke served as the Prime Minister from 1945 to 1963. Sorry guys, I don't know if that reconnected there. But this Northern Ireland Act basically stated that Northern Ireland could not leave the UK without the consent of the Northern Ireland Parliament. And as we know, or as we're going to learn moving forward, this Northern Ireland Parliament was going to be dominated by Unionists who wouldn't give consent to leave Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland under Basil Brooks, we're going to break down into 3 different kind of subcategories. We'll look at the welfare state, housing, and the economy. And what we're trying to do here is really just kind of gain an understanding into what life was like under Basil Brooks in Northern Ireland. So we're going to pay a good bit of attention here to this idea of the welfare state, as this played a big role in influencing the expansion of education in Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland benefits from social reforms that were introduced in the UK, so in areas such as housing, education, healthcare, and these benefits, such as free healthcare, such as free second level education, were extended to Northern Ireland in the 1940s in this kind of policy we know as the welfare state. So we could look to the Education Act of 1947. This made secondary level education free to all those above 11 and provided grants for those who wanted to progress further. This was going to be hugely impactful in Northern Ireland because it allowed key figures that would emerge in the civil rights movement to receive free education during this period. So a key figure we'll see here, John Hume, was educated in this welfare period in Northern Ireland. He was going to play a big role in the civil rights movement and in this Coleraine University controversy. So in housing, the Northern Ireland Trust Fund was set up in 1945 to provide public housing to the people of Northern Ireland. And this was successful. By early 1960s, 100,000 homes had been built by the Trust. However, most of these homes were going to be allocated to individuals or families by local authorities. And this is where the problem arises, because this system led to discrimination against Catholics, as local authorities tended to favour Protestants over Catholics when they were distributing houses. So we see the discrimination or the sectarian divisions start to show in society. Next, the economy. So the 1950s seen traditional industries such as shipbuilding and linen go into decline. So these industries are wartime industries. They really helped Belfast become, I suppose, an industrial centre in Northern Ireland and in Ireland. And they obviously played a big role in Britain's war effort. They were going to go into decline now. And this meant that unemployment rates in Northern Ireland were often double the UK average. So this Hall report of 1962 suggested that the Northern Ireland government should try to attract foreign investors to set up new factories and new businesses in Northern Ireland. However, Brooks wouldn't actually expand this himself, and it would be our next Prime Minister, Terrence O'Neill, who would really focus on improving this economic situation in Northern Ireland. So Terrence O'Neill as Prime Minister. So in 1963, he was elected Prime Minister of Northern Ireland without election. And he took over during a period where Protestant and Catholic tensions were low around the world. So we could look to the idea of the Pope and his idea of ecumenism, and how, I suppose, the first Catholic president of the US, JFK, was elected in the US, and then how he would visit the Republic of Ireland there after that. So tensions were low at the start of the 60s. So Sean Lemass replaced De Valera as Taoiseach in 1959, and Lemass wasn't really interested in dealing with the issue of partition. Just like O'Neill in Northern Ireland, he was focused on economic development and improving the economic situation in both countries. So O'Neill and Lemass looked to reconciliate their relationship between North and South. So O'Neill was the first Prime Minister in Northern Ireland to visit a Catholic school. He sends official condolences to the Catholic Church after the death of the Pope in 1964. So we see a small improvement in, I suppose, Protestant Catholic relations in Northern Ireland with these small gestures by O'Neill. So O'Neill and Lemass exchanged visits to Belfast and Dublin. They discussed cross-border cooperation on transport, power, agriculture and tourism, non-contentious, non-controversial, I suppose, areas where they could look to cooperate. And this was received well with nationalists, but unionists attacked O'Neill's decision. So we see tensions start to rise. Unionists, who was obviously the party that O'Neill is in charge of, weren't happy with O'Neill kind of, I suppose, opening up his arms to Catholics and looking to improve relationships. So O'Neill did focus on economic growth in Northern Ireland. We could look to the Benson report, Magee report, Wilson report, how he was looking to focus on this economic development. That's not going to be, I suppose, really relevant for what we're going to cover today, so we're going to brush over that. However, controversy around most economic investment in Northern Ireland was taking place in areas east of the River Bann, so predominantly Protestant areas. And we could look to the development of new growth centres in Lurgan and Portadown rather than Derry as almost just being a catalyst for controversy around this issue. And that's going to be important now. We're going to look at this in the context of a map, see where these areas were in Northern Ireland and how perhaps Derry was being isolated by O'Neill and by these economic investment policies. So if we look at the map of Northern Ireland, now my pen just isn't working here, guys, so I apologise. I don't know if you can see the little cursor there. But we have east of the River Bann. So most economic development was taking place east of the River Bann, which was a predominantly Protestant area closer to Belfast, while Derry is being left isolated out here on the very left. We're going to see the town of Coleraine come into this next, as the expansion of university education in Northern Ireland causes a lot of controversy and really feels, or really leaves the Catholics of Derry feeling, and the nationalists in Derry feeling, isolated and I suppose just left out of, just being isolated in their own country. So the expansion of university education in Britain. So education reforms of the 40s increased demand for university places. So this all began with the British government setting up the Robbins Committee in 1961. So this Robbins Committee recommends the establishment of new universities in areas that have not had access to universities before. So we're looking for an expansion of university education. After the welfare state education, second level education became free to all of those above 11, more people were now looking to extend their education and go into third level. And the same issues were arising in Northern Ireland. So Queen's University was the only university in the country, and the Northern Ireland government places Sir John Lockwood in charge of setting up their own committee in 1963. So this was going to be called the Lockwood Committee. And the controversy starts from here, really, because we can see the Lockwood Committee consisted of 7 members, 4 Unionists, 3 English, and 0 Catholics. And we can see the controversy start around this, and we can start to see, I suppose, how Catholics feel like they were being isolated out of this decision to expand university education in Britain. So the history of Magee College in Derry. So most people assume that the Lockwood Committee would recommend a new university to be built in Derry. And that's predominantly because of Magee College that already existed in Derry. So Derry had a growing population of about 70,000. It was Northern Ireland's second largest city behind Belfast, and it already had a third level institution in Magee College. However, Magee College had its issues. So when Irish universities were reorganised in 1908, it was excluded, and it was really struggling for funding and staff. You can see the little icon or image here. We see, when we think of Magee College, it's kind of worn down, poorly funded, small, the buildings are in need of repair, and the Northern Ireland government wasn't really providing the funding that was needed to improve Magee College. So the Lockwood Committee. So the Lockwood Committee quickly narrows their decision on where to locate this new university. So they picked 2 possible sites, Derry or Coleraine. So basically the Lockwood Committee was looking for several requirements on these 2 issues, or for these 2 issues. They were looking for characteristics that would really, I suppose, that was the ideal situation to build a new university in. So they were looking for a suitable site to develop the university. They were looking for suitable accommodation for staff and students. They were looking for local opportunities for cooperation with local industries. So they were looking for possible, foreign investment companies to be already located there, maybe to set up graduate programs with those institutions. And they were looking for the area to provide funding for the development themselves. They weren't looking, the Lockwood Committee was looking for that area to be willing to contribute towards the development of this new university. So the Lockwood Committee narrows down Derry and Coleraine as 2 possible sites, and they essentially issue a report on both sites. So the Lockwood Committee was not impressed with Derry's proposal. They felt Magee was too small to house a new university, and its buildings were in such poor state that it would take a lot of money to modernise the facilities. The committee also felt that new buildings were necessary, but the Derry delegation did not offer a proposed new site for them. So the Derry proposal said, well, we have Magee College, we could just invest a bit of money in here, expand the Magee College, and that would be our new university, while the Lockwood Committee wanted a new site to develop a new building on. There was also no obvious infrastructure in place for accommodation, so new student and staff accommodation would have to be built in Derry, and the Lockwood Committee reported that there was very little industrial development in Derry, so there was a lack of opportunities for cooperation There was a lack of opportunities for perhaps students then, once they finish college, to go straight into work in Derry, or for local companies and businesses to provide graduate programs to work side by side with the college. And there was also high sectarian divisions in Derry, which we'll see, I suppose, towards the end of the 60s come to a head anyway. Coleraine, on the other hand, really impressed the Lockwood Committee. So the delegation offered a new site on which the construction could start immediately. That was one of the requirements, a suitable site for new development of a building. Coleraine had industrial development in Coleraine was increasing, so we see it become this growth centre for economic development. So there was more administration work being placed in the area. There was a new development of whisky and linen industries located there that I suppose the Lockwood Committee deemed was appropriate to provide cooperation between the college and local industries. It was also a Protestant majority area, and what that meant for the Lockwood Committee was that there was very little sectarian tension or violence there. But that was, I suppose, on the other hand there, that's because there was a lack of actually Catholics in the area. And the Lockwood Committee decided that the fact Coleraine was, I'm going to put like kind of quotations here, quite close to Derry, it would compensate for the loss. In reality, it wasn't that close to Derry, but that was kind of what the Lockwood Committee were suggesting at this point. So recommendations of the Lockwood Committee. 16th of December 1964, the Lockwood Report was presented to the Northern Ireland Cabinet by Minister for Education Herbert Kirk. It suggested that higher education should be available to everyone in Northern Ireland, but it must be based on academic ability. They suggested that a second university was needed for Northern Ireland due to the increase in numbers accessing third level education and then the inability of Queen's to expand further. We already knew this after, I suppose, the Robbins Committee had kind of set that up in Britain. They suggested that the second university should be in Coleraine, and then even more controversially, they said Magee College should close as a third level institution and no longer receive government funding. So the nationalists, especially in Derry at this time, really felt isolated. They felt they were being denied the opportunity for a new college to be developed in their area. But now they felt they were also, I suppose, the third level education that was third level institute that was already located there was being taken away from them. So it was like almost, two blows to the nationalist community in Derry. And I suppose this is going to lead to a reaction in Derry and in Stormont. So we're going to break down both essentially. So ahead of the publication of the Lockwood Report, the University for Derry Committee was established as a local action group. So this group consisted of 3 Catholics and 3 Protestant members who were led by John Hume. So we talked about John Hume earlier, being kind of, I suppose, growing up in this welfare state where he received free access to secondary education. Now he's pushing for, I suppose, more equal education opportunities in Northern Ireland. And I'd just like to highlight, I wish my pen was working, guys, so I apologise again. If we compare this to, I suppose, the ratio of Protestants, Catholics, Nationalist Unionists that were on the Lockwood Committee, we see, I suppose, cooperation between the two communities. 3 Catholics, 3 Protestant members working together to get this third level institute into Derry, while the Lockwood Committee, the symbolism there of no Catholics or Nationalists being actually, I suppose, just even represented at the discussions, really led to further isolation of that community. So the group outlined how the decision to locate a second university outside of Derry was further evidence of government neglect of Derry and therefore government neglect of the nationalist and Catholic community in Northern Ireland. That's a really powerful point there, that this was actual physical evidence that the nationalist community was being neglected and isolated in Northern Ireland. So a public meeting to support Derry's claim was held at Guildhall in Derry on the 8th of February 1965. So it was organised by the University for Derry Committee, so 3 Catholics, 3 Protestants led by John Hume, and Unionist Mayor of Derry, Albert Anderson. So more evidence that we see cooperation between these two divided communities in trying to kind of work together to lead this action group to get a third level institute located in Derry. That's really important here. That's why I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the cooperation between the two communities in Derry on this issue. So 1,500 people attended, which really emphasised the whole community uniting on the issue. So I've put that in bold there because that's really important. We see the two communities come together. The committee wanted to demonstrate the strength and unity of their opposition to the Lockwood report and organised a motorcade to travel from Derry to Stormont on the 18th of So reaction to the Lockwood report in Stormont. So Stormont was initially shocked by the strength of opposition to the Lockwood report. And I suppose at this point we hadn't really seen any cooperation between nationalists and unionists, and now we can see an activist group come together where they're putting, I suppose, the divisions and the tensions between the two communities apart, and they're looking to rally together to get, I suppose, the job done and get a third level or institute located in Derry. However, O'Neill took measures to ensure the recommendations were accepted from the Lockwood Committee. So the day after the motorcade, O'Neill held a secret meeting with 7 high-profile members of the Unionist Party who were from Derry. So this meeting is referred to as O'Neill meeting nameless, faceless men. And this, I suppose, phrase or quote was given to us by Unionist Party member Robert Nixon. And it's an absolutely amazing quote. I'd almost expect to see that included in our contextualisation mini essay towards the end. So I'd highlight that quote if I had my highlighter. So Nixon stated that these men tried to persuade O'Neill to ignore the plea from Derry and to locate the university in Coleraine. And if we think about that, these are people from Derry who were trying to persuade O'Neill to ignore the plea from the majority of people in Derry and to actually locate the university in Coleraine. So it's counterintuitive. It's hard to understand why these men would, I suppose, not want development in their local area. So both the O'Neill and the Unionist men revealed their concerns that the economic development of Derry might lead to a further increase in the Catholic population, which would threaten the political control of Unionists in Derry. And that's a very controversial, I suppose, aspect to even think about, that these men from Derry were almost afraid to accept this university in Derry because it might lead to a further increase in Catholic population, which would obviously threaten their control, because if Catholics were in the majority then, they were obviously able to vote Catholics or nationalists into power, and we'd see Unionists, I suppose, lose their foothold that they had in Derry. So the debate in Stormont on the Lockwood report lasted 16 hours and was quite heated at times, and O'Neill actually decided to apply the party whip in a vote to approve the Lockwood report. So what this party whip means, it means that O'Neill instructed Unionist Party members to vote in favour of the Lockwood report, and if they did not, they would be expelled from the party. And in the end, the vote was carried by 27 votes to 19 votes. So the significance of this Coleraine University controversy, we see the loss of university was a huge blow to both Unionists and Nationalists in Derry, and we can gain a really good understanding of that as we've seen both communities kind of rally together. We see them form this University for Derry Committee, where it was represented equally by Catholics and Catholics and Protestants, Unionists and Nationalists. We see the Unionist Mayor of Derry get involved in this activism. So it was a huge loss for both communities in Derry. So Nationalists blamed the decision on the government's anti-Catholic rhetoric, and they felt that the government was following a policy of blocking economic development for Catholic areas. That's really important because that's going to lead to an increase in tensions, an increase in anti-government sentiment in Catholic areas, nationalist areas, and it really just added to the division and the isolation of the nationalist community in Northern Ireland, which would obviously play this huge role when we look at, I suppose, the significance of the Troubles or even the outbreak of the Troubles, where this community feels so isolated, feels so alone that they have to fight for themselves, essentially. So disbelief undermined any faith nationalists had in O'Neill and the Unionist government, and it actually supported or led to the development of this civil rights movement in the 1960s. So we've seen John Hume's activism in this University for Derry Committee. We'll see John Hume extend that in the civil rights movements and the development of NICRA in Northern Ireland towards the end of the 60s. However, Unionists in Derry were also angry with the decision, but they received little sympathy from the Unionist Party. And the sectarian tensions that were obviously evident in Derry meant that they could not unite with nationalists against the unionist government. And instead, what this did was increase support for like radical loyalists. So like Ian Paisley and the DUP gained a lot of support in Derry, as the unionists in Derry and the Protestants in Derry felt isolated from their own unionist government because they were losing out on the development of this third level institute in the area as well. So that's really important to understand, that it wasn't just the nationalist community in Derry that felt at a loss here, the unionists did as well. And what that did for these unionists, it almost turned them towards loyalism. So the more extreme end, the more radical end of, we'll say, the political spectrum there. Okay, that was a really quick crash course in the content of the Coleraine University Controversy. 27 minutes. We're on time anyway to get everything included in this. That's what my goal was, so I apologise if I flew through that a little bit quickly. But let's look at where this comes into play for an exam situation for us. So the only time politics and society in Northern Ireland has been prescribed as a documents-based question was in 2010 and 2011. So in 2010, the Sunningdale Agreement came up, and in 2011, the Apprentice Boys of Derry came up. Now, this means that the Coleraine University Controversy has never been asked as a documents-based question before. And that obviously leads me to ask myself and look back over, I suppose, just past papers here for the Leaving Cert history course. Does this possibly increase chances of it coming up next year? And I'm going to say it doesn't. So like if we look at last year, the last documents-based question was USA and the wider world. So just like Northern Ireland here, space race. Essentially, I'm not going to go into it too much detail here, but one case study hadn't been asked before. Everyone kind of banked on that it was going to come up, and it didn't come up. So I'm not going to suggest here that the Coleraine University is going to come up as our documents-based question next year. There's no point in just tunnel holing ourselves and only picking one documents-based question. We cover all three in good detail. They're all very accessible. They all link on to each other. They follow a nice chronological order. So this Saturday session, we're going to cover the Coleraine University Controversy. We don't just bank this one. There's a good chance that it probably won't come up again. We've seen that if we look at the kind of the past Leaving Cert papers where people have been let down, where they bank a case study. We're going to cover all three in significant detail, and they all lead into each other. They all kind of help support a better understanding and a better development of our knowledge of politics and society in Northern Ireland. But what that also means is we have no past exam questions to answer on the Coleraine University Controversy as a documents-based question. But we're still going to cover a sample answer here in today's lesson, and we're going to look for how we plan for those sample answers. Before we do that, let's go through, I suppose, guidelines for answering the documents-based questions. We're going to break down each section. We look at 4 sections of it, and we look at how we answer each section, how long our answer should be, and yeah, we're going to look at a sample, how we plan for, and then how we write a sample answer for the Coleraine University Controversy. So timing is absolutely key here, and I'm sure you guys know that with your own history teachers. We are stuck for time in the history exam. We have to be very, very strict with our timing, and that's the same for the documents-based question. So we have 45 minutes to complete this, and then we usually have 40 minutes per essay then after that. So there are 4 parts to a documents-based question: comprehension, comparison, criticism, and contextualization. I'm gonna I wish I could, sorry, once again my pen just isn't connecting here, but contextualization is our mini essay in this Saturday session. We're going to plan for the Coleraine University contextualization question, and we're going to give you a sample answer towards that as well. So this is what our questions for a case study will look like, or for our documents-based question. So number 1, you can see we have our comprehension, 2, comparison, 3, criticism, 4, contextualization. So 20, 20, 20, 40, so 80 marks in total. Obviously our mini essay, the contextualization, accounting for 50% of the marks here. And we're going to show how that's where most of our focus goes to, really. So comprehension, pretty straightforward. Most students will achieve full marks in this section, and we have a couple of keys to success here. So underline the relevant parts of the abstract. So I want to see you physically writing on the documents-based question. Once again, we had no past papers to look at here, but in our following Saturday session, when we look at the Apprentice Boys of Derry, I literally have my visualizer up and I'm going to go through how we answer that whole question. So we couldn't do it for this one. There's no past papers to answer it on, but that's what we're going to be looking at in our next Saturday session. So I'd just say check back in for that one. You'll see me actually physically with the camera out answering a documents-based question. So we underline the relevant parts of the extract. We give brief answers, one-line answers here. Biggest mistake students will make here is they write full sentences. They're writing maybe 6 to 10 lines. When we give short answers here, we're looking for direct references to the text, and we can actually write really brief, like just give the answer that we need. I'm going to show you what that looks like. We quote from the document, so I want to see reference, direct quotes from the documents. That's expected here. That's how we pick up our marks. And the types of questions that will be asked around this are, in document A, what is meant by? What evidence does document B offer about? And we'll give a brief, short, one-line answer where we'll directly quote from the document. Question 2, the comparison questions. So basically students are being asked to compare two accounts of the same historical event, note similarities and differences between the two. So you'll have two sources. You're going to have to compare both sources. Are they saying the same thing? Are they, I suppose, contrasting? Is there bias in one towards the other, etc.? So keys to success here. Underline, highlight parts of the text that's used for answering questions. Circle or highlight key aspects of cartoons and captions. If we get like a cartoon as one of our sources, we need to use both documents. So you'll see that in action when we look at the Apprentice Boys of Derry case study. When I actually answer one of these for you, you'll see that we have to use both documents to achieve full marks. You compare and contrast one with the other. Answer will be about, let's say, half a page here. So giving us good context of how much we need to write as well. So types of questions. How does document A differ from document B in relation to opinions on the Coleraine University? Which document shows the greater optimism? Discuss with reference to both documents. You'll only receive half the marks if you only refer to one document. We want to see references to both documents, quotes from both documents included in the answers. How do the documents differ in their interpretation of the Coleraine University Controversy? So I'd imagine, or I'd envision, two sources here. One source would be from the nationalist community, their opinion on the Coleraine University Controversy. Second source would be from the unionist community, and how we can see the different interpretation of the event. So 3, criticism. Students need to be able to recognize bias, propaganda, note different viewpoints, identify contradictions, make judgments about the reliability of sources. So do we know what's a reliable source, what's a not so reliable source? If we're looking at newspaper articles, is the writer going to be biased? Are they showing bias in the writing? That's all what we're looking to do here. So keys to success. So learn notes on the strengths and weaknesses of different source types. So we should be able to look at where this source comes from, and we should have a brief understanding in our head, or a good understanding of our head. Is that a strong or a weak source? Why is it a strong source? Why is it a weak source? If it's a newspaper article, it's a strong source because it gives us, I suppose, a snapshot of opinion in that period of time, from that period of time. However, the writer could be biased towards one side. We need to understand the difference between eyewitness accounts, newspaper articles, government records, diaries, letters, cartoons. That kind of links in with the first one. The strengths and weaknesses of both source types. We can learn notes on those answers. So we need to use evidence from both documents in our answer. Once again, referring to both documents, that's important. And we must identify objectivity, subjectivity, bias, balanced view, reliability, fact, opinion, propaganda, strengths and weaknesses, primary, secondary sources, viewpoints and perspectives. They're the type of words we want to be using when we're criticizing these sources. So they're our bread and butter keywords of history. We cover them in first year and junior cycle. We need to be trying to use them in our answers now. So the answer will be about half a page once again. And the types of questions we'll ask: should a historian accept document A as a reliable source? Give reasons for your answer. What are the strengths and weaknesses of document B as a historical source? So we're criticizing the sources that have been given to us. Okay, and the one that causes all the hassle for students, the contextualization or the mini essay. So when we see the word contextualization, what that actually means for you is that you'll need to be able to place the subject or the topic of these documents in historical context and show understanding of issues, events that are associated with that period. So we're not going to be making reference to the documents in this question. It's like a mini essay, and we need to show context of what was going around the issue at the time. So as I said, just after this slide here, we're going to plan for and then answer a contextualization question on the Coleraine University Controversy. So keys to success for a contextualization: we keep to the question asked, we recycle keywords of questions throughout the answer, and we approach this like a mini essay. So we have to write 5 main paragraphs with a really small intro and a really small conclusion towards the end. Keep the introduction and conclusion short. That's important. We're going to pick up most of our marks in these 5 main paragraphs. And what I always say, what top history students will be doing, they'll be using connective words throughout. They'll be linking their paragraphs back to the question. They'll be recycling the keywords of the question in their paragraph. Hopefully you'll see that in the sample answer that I give us towards the end. So the types of questions that will come up here: why did the decision to establish a university at Coleraine provoke controversy? So if we're recycling keywords of our question here, the keyword that I'm going to expect to see in my student's answer is controversy. Why was it controversial? To what extent did a decision to locate a second university in the city of Coleraine show evidence of the deliberate neglect of the city of Derry by the unionist government? So our key word that we'll be trying to recycle back in our linking sentences here is neglect. How did this situation show neglect to the city of Derry? And I'd actually know with that question, it doesn't just say nationalists. So we could make reference to the neglect of unionists, and how I suppose that radicalized unionists, how that led or supported unionists supporting radical movements like the DUP, Ian Paisley in Derry. Okay, so mini essay or contextualization plan. We're going to take our first question here. Why did the decision to establish a university at Coleraine provoke controversy? So we'll start with a nice short and sweet intro. Our first paragraph, we're going to outline Magee College in Derry and how that provides context to the situation. We're going to go through this in much more detail as well. This is just a brief outline. Paragraph 2, we're going to compare Derry versus Coleraine, both cities or regions' proposals to the Lockwood Committee, why the Lockwood Committee favoured Coleraine over Derry. We'll talk about reaction to the Lockwood report in Derry, reaction to the Lockwood report in Stormont, and then the significance of this all and how it affected both nationalist and unionist communities in Northern Ireland. And then we'll finally finish with a short conclusion towards the end. So as I said, we're going to cover how we plan for this in a lot more detail than just looking at a brief outline of what each paragraph is going to be about. So within each paragraph, we're going to look at what points need to be included. So our intro here, our intro is going to be nice, short and sweet. Maybe I've actually included a little bit too much here, but we'll talk about the impact of the welfare state in Northern Ireland, expansion of university education in Britain. Maybe we could throw in the Robbins Committee and where this Lockwood Committee got its, I suppose, inspiration from. We'll highlight the fact that Queen's University is the only university in the country, and after the impact of this welfare state, we see more, I suppose, people trying to access third level education. We'll look at Sir John Lockwood setting up the Lockwood Committee, and then we'll finish with the ratio of members of the Lockwood Committee, and we're always linking back to this word, controversy. So that's why it was controversial. There was no Catholics actually represented at this committee. Secondly, or our first paragraph then, our main paragraphs, will look at Magee College in Derry. So we'll describe 3 assumptions why people thought that the new university would be built in Derry, I suppose second largest city in Northern Ireland, fastly growing population, and then we look at already had a third level institute there that could have just been developed even further. So we'll describe the relevance of Magee College in Derry, and then we'll probably mention the problems that were associated with it, how it was already poorly funded, buildings in need of repair, how it was already essentially isolated, because we can always come back to the idea that the nationalist community was isolated here. Paragraph 2, we're going to look at the proposals of Derry and Coleraine and how the Lockwood Committee I suppose evaluated them. So we'll outline what was the Lockwood Committee looking for, what were their requirements: suitable site for accommodation, suitable site for development of a new building, local opportunities for cooperation, And then we're going to look to describe the evaluation of Derry and describe the evaluation of Coleraine there and how perhaps that was controversial. What's controversial there? The Lockwood Committee makes reference to sectarian tension in Derry, while it highlights, I suppose, a positive aspect of Coleraine's proposal, that there was no sectarian tension, but that's because it was a Protestant majority area. So we see that isolation and that controversy kind of rear its head there. Paragraph 3, we'll look at the reaction to the Lockwood report in Derry. There's loads going on here, so we'll quickly, and I say quickly, define the recommendations of the Lockwood report. One sentence, outline the establishment of the University for Derry Committee, John Hume's role in that, how there was, I suppose, cooperation between nationalist and Protestant communities in Derry. We see 3 Catholics, 3 Protestants form this committee with the support of Unionist Mayor of Derry. We'll describe the public meeting of the 8th of February 1965, 1,500 people outside Guildhall in Derry, how that kind of shows the strength and unity of both communities fighting to get this third level institute in Derry. And we'll describe the motorcade that was organised for the 18th of February, and we could maybe mention O'Neill's poor reaction to this, I suppose, display of strength and unity from both communities in Derry. Then we'll outline the reaction in Stormont. So the initial reaction of Stormont, how it was actually quite shocked that those communities were working together in this kind of activist organisation, or this local activist group in the University for Derry Committee, and how they were just surprised at the strength of the movement in opposition to the Lockwood report. We'll describe O'Neill's secret meeting with 7 unionists from Derry, how that's controversial. I'd look for you to include Robert Nixon and his nameless, faceless men speech. That's a really good quote to include there, evidence of outside reading. And we'll describe details of the debate in Stormont. Discuss O'Neill applying the party whip. How is that controversial? So O'Neill essentially forcing unionist members, saying you're either supporting this movement or we're out of the move, or we're either supporting this Lockwood report or you're out of the Unionist Party. And then finally, paragraph 5, before we conclude, we'll look at describe the loss of university for Unionists and Nationalists in Derry, how it was a loss for both communities. I like to really emphasise that point, that it wasn't just the Nationalist community here that was, I suppose, isolated. It was the Unionists as well. They were working together on this issue, really pushing to get this third level institute located there, and it was a big loss for both of them. We'll look to discuss the increase of government's anti-Catholic sentiment, and how this kind of supported, I suppose, just supported the further division of the nationalist and Catholic community in Northern Ireland, how they felt isolated. And obviously, when we look further on in our Northern Ireland case studies here, we'll see how this all rises to a head through, I suppose, the Battle of the Bogside, through, I suppose, the Sunningdale Agreement, the Ulster Workers Unionist, Ulster Unionist Workers Strike, and we'll also discuss how this strengthens the support for the civil rights movement. So the leaders of this Derry Committee, University for Derry Committee, John Hume, who went on then to start this civil rights movement, like he helps to establish NICRA and really starts pushing for more equal Catholic and nationalist rights in Northern Ireland. And I'd also like to see students discuss how it radicalised unionism in Derry. So we see support for Ian Paisley's DUP in the area increase. And that would play a big role in, I suppose, all these tensions eventually coming to a head in Derry, where we see an extremely divided society between unionists and nationalists. And we see more radical nationalists and more radical unionists. And I suppose this Coleraine University controversy really contributed to the division of those communities. Okay, let's look at a sample answer here. So at this point, and that's my planning process there, I should probably should have talked us through that there. I want to see a brief outline, so just the topic of each paragraph. Then we're going to extend our plan, and we're going to go, okay, what do I have to talk about in each paragraph? So we go paragraph 1, Magee College, what boxes do I need to tick here? So in my writing process, I'm given a brief plan, then I'm given a detailed plan, then I'm going to write my essay. And we can go back after we're writing our essay, we might think that didn't really work, didn't really fit with the linking word and recycling the key words, controversy in the topic, and we'll go back and adjust our plan. So my students will go through that writing process, brief outline, detailed plan, then we'll write our essay. So our essay, why did the decision to establish a university at Coleraine provoke controversy? So as we're reading through this, what I'd like you to just pay attention to is just the use of connective or linking words in paragraphs, how I'm recycling the word controversy at the end of each paragraph, really trying to show to the examiner that I'm engaging with what the question's actually asking me. So we're not just seeing the University of Coleraine and essentially rattling off an essay that we've just learnt off by heart. We're actively engaging with what the question's asking us. So by using a sentence at the end of every paragraph that uses the word controversy or that was controversial, really shows that we're trying to engage with the question at hand. And also look for, I said, connective and linking words. So historians have argued the extent of the role of Coleraine University in promoting sectarian controversy throughout the history of Northern Ireland. The controversy can be traced back to the introduction of social reforms through the welfare state in Britain. For example, the Education Act of 1947 made secondary education free to all those above the age of 11. These education reforms in the 1940s increased demand for university places across Britain and led to the British government setting up the Lockwood Committee in 1961. The same issues were arising in Northern Ireland as Queen's University was the only third level institute serving in the country. This eventually led to the Northern Ireland government appointing Sir John Lockwood to establish the Lockwood Committee in 1963. The Lockwood Committee controversially consisted of seven members, 4 Unionists, 3 English, and no Catholics. It is therefore clear from the beginning of the Lockwood Committee it would provoke controversy. Using that linking sentence to show the examiner I'm actively engaging with the question at hand. It could be argued at the time the most reasonable place to build a new university in Northern Ireland was in Derry. The city had a growing population of 70,000. It was Northern Ireland's second largest city behind Belfast and already had a third level institute in the form of Magee College. This meant that most people assumed that the Lockwood Committee would recommend a new university to be built in Derry. However, the Northern Ireland government had provided very little funding for the college. This meant that Magee College had remained small, poorly funded, and in need of considerable investment in the form of repairs. The fact that most people assumed Magee College would be redeveloped into a new university would provide more grounds for controversy through the period. Once again, using that linking word, actively engaging with the question. The Lockwood Committee were looking for several requirements on the site to develop a new university. Suitable site, suitable accommodation for students, local opportunities for cooperation with industries, and that the area could provide funding for the development. Firstly, the Lockwood Committee were not impressed with Derry's proposal. They felt Magee was too small and that it would cost too much money to redevelop the site. On the other hand, they were extremely impressed with Coleraine as they proposed a new site to develop the university on, and the area had recently experienced economic growth with the development of linen and whisky industries. Controversially, the Lockwood Committee decided the fact Coleraine was quite close to Derry, it would compensate for the loss. Once again, we see our Lincoln sentence. On the 16th of December 1964, the Lockwood Committee suggested that the second university should be located in Coleraine and that Magee College should close down and no longer receive government funding. This decision led to the formation of a local action group in Derry, the University for Derry Committee. This group consisted of 3 Catholics, 3 Protestants, and was led by John Hume. Firstly, the group organised a public meeting outside of Guildhall in Derry. 1,500 people attended the meeting led by Hume and Unionist Mayor of Derry, Albert Anderson. Furthermore, the group organised a motorcade that travelled from Derry to Stormont in protest of the report. Over 2,000 vehicles took part in the journey, while those who couldn't take part held a 2-minute silence in Derry. Both events were significant in demonstrating the extent of opposition to the Lockwood report, while showing the strength and unity of the people in Derry as the whole community came together on this controversial report. We can also infer that Stormont was initially shocked by the strength of opposition to the Lockwood report. However, O'Neill took controversial measures to ensure the recommendations were accepted. Days after the motorcade, O'Neill held a secret meeting with high-profile members of the Unionist Party from Derry. It has been said that O'Neill and the men revealed concerns that the economic development of Derry might lead to further increase in the Catholic population, which would threaten the political control of Unionists in Derry. Furthermore, the debate in Stormont and the Lockwood report lasted over 16 hours and was extremely heated. It led to O'Neill controversially applying the party whip and instructing members to vote in favour of the report. The vote was carried out by 27 votes to 19. Consequently, we can see how the event provoked controversy even within the ranks of the Unionist-dominated Parliament. Last paragraph. The Coleraine University Controversy was an extremely controversial and significant event in the history of Northern Ireland. Firstly, the loss of a university in Derry was a considerable blow to both Unionists and Nationalists. The decision increased the nationalist community's sense of anti-Catholic rhetoric, and this resulted in strengthening support for the subsequent civil rights movements that would develop in Northern Ireland. On the other hand, the event isolated Unionists in Derry from the mainstream Unionist Party. This in turn would radicalise unionism in Derry as the area developed a hotbed for support for Ian Paisley's DUP. We can therefore see that the Coleraine University would have a deep and lasting impact which controversially divided both communities in Northern Ireland. Gerry Fitz summarised the controversy in his maiden speech at Westminster. The only consideration which activated the minds of the Unionist powers was that 2/3 of the population of Londonderry were Catholics. And I'll include a short conclusion there that doesn't introduce any more new information and really just, I suppose, solidifies what we said in that sample answer so far. So hopefully you could just see through that sample answer the use of linking words, the use of words like firstly, therefore, consequently, furthermore. They're connective words that really, I suppose, just support a better structure to your paragraphs. And then what you'd notice, I'm just recycling keywords of the question: controversial, controversy, at the last sentence of each paragraph, trying to demonstrate to the examiner that I'm actively engaging with the question. Anyway, guys, that is everything I have planned for today. 53 minutes. So we done well for time. I was worried about timing, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave it there, folks. If you'd like to access any more I suppose just content from the Leaving Cert History course, there is a discount code that you can use. It's Coleraine. It's active until tomorrow night, and that'll get you 20% off standard and premium plans. And as I said, there's video breakdowns, H1 notes, PowerPoints, links to past papers, and self-correcting quizzes, all available there for the whole Leaving Cert History course. So I'm going to leave it there with you guys. Have a good Saturday, and I'll speak to you soon.